Okay. So thanks heaps for the opportunity, and Linda Parlane, my partner who was going to come tonight, just sends her apologies. She's caught up in the National Parks campaign that's hopefully coming to a head. But she wanted me to pass on her apologies, but also to say how fantastic it is that you're working on buses, working with Peter on the 506, which is our local bus in West Brunswick. And you know, it really does need improving. We spend a lot of our time on those buses, and it's fantastic that local people are starting to come together to work out how we might fix it. What I'd like to talk about is just some bigger picture of why people like myself, Peter, others, think that it's possible to improve bus systems in a city like Melbourne. Like, a lot of people will go, yeah, but buses are buses and they're terrible. And that's somehow a fact of our life. You know, we've created a city that's impossible to have buses in for all sorts of reasons. Too not dense enough, people hate them, all those things. But all those things have counterexamples in other parts of the world, and a basic principle, which I hope you can explain, that helps you understand why we should have ambition for something much, much better than we have now, much, much better than just the 506 on Sunday, something that makes buses part of what the Swiss say about public transport is, it's the job of public transport is to take people from where they are to where they want to go in the time that they have available, and nothing else will do. And if you're the Swiss engineers and the Swiss politicians and the Swiss communities, they act from that principle and create a public transport system that does just that for the majority of people. And we could have that in Melbourne. So
Apart from down here on the table, the phone's fallen over.
Okay. We might need a biscuit. We might need a biscuit to hold it up.
But you have to stop eating the biscuit because
if they're not
strong
heavy
enough.
How's that?
We're getting a little bit of echo from you guys. I don't know if you're able to. Yeah, great, thank you.
So, I can try and do this. So, this is a map. People might have seen it. It's Melbourne coloured in on an international scale, which says how easy is it to get from one point to any other point in Melbourne. So does public transport provide that alternative for ordinary people going about their ordinary lives? And for most of Melbourne, it's in a scale which is so low that it's off the international scale. It's too poor to even calculate whether it's any good. So that means there's almost non-existent public transport outside peak hours, and evenings and weekends public transport deserts as well. If you go through, you can see that some of Melbourne is green, which is in the good or very good on an international scale. Nowhere in Melbourne is excellent. There's Bell Street across here. So even south of Bell Street, there's still large areas that are black. So all of us who do manage to fit public transport in our lives tend to get to the point where we say, yeah, it's all right. You know, if I squeeze myself into this horrible shape, I can make public transport do what I think it ought to do some of the time. And we say, yeah, that's all right, that's good. And so often people say, we've got public transport rich inner suburbs and public transport poor outer suburbs. Actually, we've got mediocre at best across most of Melbourne in terms of how easy it is to get from one place to another. Footscray is actually some of the best in Melbourne, because you can actually from Footscray station get to a wide number of places, and from Footscray you can get to a lot of places. But even if you get on the train, if you get to the other end of the line or along to the stations, you can't go anywhere once you get to the station because there's no connections. So why is that, and why somewhere like Vancouver, can, particularly, I mean, their outer suburbs are diabolical as well. Living in the outer suburbs of car-oriented cities is hell across the world. But across the inner and middle suburbs, they've actually got a system where people can actually do much more. In fact, there's places, large areas along their Skyrail, which are actually excellent on an international scale. So this is a city, grew up much later than Melbourne and had to retrofit all its public transport from the 70s. It only had buses up until the 1970s, and it's built some basically automated trams with their own right of way. But from that slow beginnings, they have actually built a system that does a lot. So why does that work? And as Peter said, grids are easy to draw, but this is a grid which shows a city, everything's spread out evenly, and you've got a certain amount of public transport, and somebody's decided that we'll just put the buses on the north-south routes, and we'll say, if you live near one of those routes, you can get, it's like you can get along the upfield line, but when you get off the upfield train, you can't go very far, can't get to West Brunswick on a Sunday. So if somebody comes along and says, right, we're going to put more money into public transport, we're going to double the services that we've got. So what do? Well, one option is to double the frequencies on the lines that you've got, which makes it more convenient so more people will use it. If the upfield line was running every 10 minutes, more people would use it. But they'd still be stuck when they got to wherever they were going. At Gowrie, you couldn't get to Faulkner, wherever it is. So the other way of thinking about it is to say, let's use that same resources and have bus frequencies of some level going east, west and north, south. And then if the transfer point works, if the connection works, you can actually get from one place to anywhere else. So that's what a car can do. You can say, I'm here in my car, I can choose to go anywhere. Here's a public transport system that allows me to choose wherever I go, so long as I can make that connection. And that's where public transport planning has to focus, because that's where you get the benefit, that's where you get the bang for your buck. And spending a certain amount of money, because you can't link every point with every other point. That would be a taxi for everybody, and that can't be afforded. So you have to have a system that allows people to get together for different parts of their journey. So people would share it up to there, and some people would get off of there and go over to Thornbury. Some people would go up here and go to Glenroy or to Faulkner. So this allows people to choose where they go, and that's the fundamental thing that people need to be able to do is, I've got this job today, I've got this dentist doctor's appointment, I've got my friends I need to see. Whatever you're doing, you can choose a public transport system that works. And so that's the key. But how do you make those transfers work? And those connections are what gives you the freedom of a public transport system. So at some level, it's having the frequency so that if the upfield line's running every 10 minutes, so are the buses. And 10 minutes is the sort of international standard of what's a wait that people will do. So building a 10-minute maximum wait between services is something that seems to, people are willing to do that. Any longer than that and they start thinking, well, this isn't working. And you'd also have to have the physical connection too. You've got to be able to find the bus when you get off the train. Everybody's going, yes, I know. What do I turn left? Do I turn right? Is this tiny little sign that somebody's vandalised?
And it just takes off as you find
Yeah.
where it is.
Yes, exactly. So that's basically the principle is how can we do that? And then this is getting a bit more nerdy than really I ought to be, but I couldn't resist. If you have a public transport system which you can categorise it on how many bus kilometres or how many public transport service kilometres of all the different modes you have per head of population. And in Melbourne and Munich, we have similar amounts of public transport per head of population. And they have a similar system to us. They have long distance trains, the S-Bahns, they have the U-Bahns and the trams, and they have buses in the inner city and in the outskirts. So it's quite a comparable system in terms of the scale of it. It covers an area of a much larger area, 5,000 square kilometres compared to 2,500 or just over 2,000 for Melbourne. So it covers a greater area. But for that same amount of service per head of population, they are getting more than twice as many people, so twice as many trips per head of population. So the average person in Munich makes 240 trips a year. In Melbourne, it's about 120. So doubling the amount at the same expense of service quality. So that's basically what transport planners need to do, is to pull apart the difference between use and service provision. And it's the connections that you make between different services that makes the system work. And that's what Vancouver's done really effectively, is to make it a system where when it's bus to bus, the frequencies are such that people will make the transfers. When you get to the SkyTrain, it's running every 2 or 3 minutes. You know, so people can put together their lives without having to be so dependent on a timetable and a choice, a very, very limited choice of places that are accessible. So can we do something like that in Melbourne? Well, I haven't done a lot of the detailed work of the northern suburbs, but I think this is what perhaps needs to happen, and maybe the council can help with it, and you as part of the community campaign can work out how we actually get a plan for the northern suburbs. But in the west, where we focus because the need is so huge, it's people in these new estates that are walking 5 kilometres to a bus that almost never comes. There's people who have moved to Australia from India, found that they couldn't get to the university to get their physiotherapy qualification accepted in Australia in the time that they had available. It was 2 hours each way, and they had the commitments, just couldn't work. They've gone back to India. There's people whose lives are just completely turned on their head, and it's the same all across suburban Melbourne. There's people who are stuck at home, people who can't get the economic independence to escape family violence. All of those things are, the cost to human lives of having poor public transport, is huge. So we've been working in the West with people who are facing those sort of problems. And we started by looking at where all the routes were. And there's about 80 routes in the West. And most of them, because of many reasons, but historically and up till now, there's a standard that the public transport department sets in its new routes, is to try and get everybody within 400 metres of the bus stop. So that's the standard. We'll try and get every house within 400 metres of the bus stop. They're not able to do that in the new estates, but that's their aim. And I saw somebody, as I was coming here, when I was riding along Albion Street, leaning against the pole, waiting for a bus. And the standard is that people are living within 400 metres of the pole, not 400 metres of where that pole might take you. So if you're a European planner, the Viennese planning system and many others have a standard which says people need to be within 800 metres of a public transport service that takes them where they want to go. The Viennese system says their slogan is "the city belongs to you," and public transport is the way that fulfills that claim. So we have a system which gives people access to a pole, not access to the city. And so what we really need is a standard which says, let's get people able to move around the city. And what's interesting is if you take those, we did this as a conceptual exercise, and it's not what you would do in the real world, but what we said is, can we take those bus kilometres that we're using to develop that, what we call the spaghetti system, and can we get it into some sort of grid that may actually help people's lives? And yes, you can, and most of the West could be within 800 metres of a bus that could run every 10 minutes, 7 days a week. So using the same number of bus kilometres. Now that would be a huge disruption to people's lives, to say we're going to take all the bus kilometres and reorganise them, and and there's people who would miss out a little bit, and it just would be a political nightmare.
Could you go back to the slide before, just to compare what? So does there not so much going out now? There's not so much further out. Is that how it was done? There's more a bit closer to the.
No, it's still.
Oh, does it still go? Okay.
It's still, but basically what we're saying for people at Melbourne at the moment, you would, if you are travelling in, then you would need the Melbourne electrification, you would need the rail system to do those longer distance trips, and that's
They've got a train at Melbourne.
Yeah, but they've only got the V line.
Every 40 minutes on the weekend, for example.
Yeah.
The V line. Oh, they've got the V line at Melbourne.
Yeah, so it's the V line coming from Ballarat.
And they've got to squeeze in with the Ballarat people, so a busy weekend, the train's already got every seat taken when it gets to Nelson, and here's another 200.
And that's something that's been
quite good trains though, those trains.
Yeah.
And they go quite far.
Yeah.
I mean, I know they're not electrified, but that's, yeah.
But so that's part of, and the promise has always been to do that, but for a million reasons it hasn't happened. But this, so you'd still, your system that you might want to create in the longer term would connect Melbourne into the other stations better. But this was just to say, what could you do with the existing bus kilometres? So it was more as a sort of thought exercise to say, could you do something like Munich or Vancouver, where they have said, we're going to try and give you a system which allows you to get to many places. And yes, we could.
But it's not that grid, it's not the 800.
Most 85% of people would be within 800 metres.
It's still a long way to walk.
Sure, yeah. But that's the maximum distance.
Yeah.
So it's not everybody that will be doing that. And it's also one of the things that we've just been recently able to get access to through work that Peter and others have done, to information about what the department thinks about this. And they've done a lot of surveying, and people in Melbourne have said to them, if you gave me a service that ran much more frequently and connected me to a lot more places I want to go, then I would be prepared to walk further than I do now. And
and the other comparison you can just make for these northern suburbs, people on the weekends when the buses are every 40 minutes or not running, they're walking 800 metres or a kilometre to one of the trams to go into the city, because they can't catch a bus across the Strathmore or to Essendon, because they just don't exist on a Sunday. So the idea 800 metres is, that's way too much. There's a lot of people already walking a kilometre on a weekend to get the tram down Sydney Road or down Melville Road.
And for people who that is an issue with, then you do need sort of local services, and whether that's flexible services, whether that's whatever that might be, but you do need to, you can't say, well, no, we won't cover people off. And most systems internationally have services that work much better than our disability access services. But what the community's been doing is basically rallying around, well, basically what we did with that initial idea and that initial research is to go out to communities in the West and say, would you like something like this? And they said, well, yes, we would. You know, this would change our lives. So working with the Sustainable Cities Collective at Friends of the Earth and groups that have now formed in the local estates and all the way across the West, and with all the, particularly with Wyndham, Brimbank and Melton councils, everybody's got together to say, yes, we want something that improves the system. We actually recognise that it's not something that's too big to ask for. So people are asking in all sorts of ways.
Have you had any wins?
Well, yes. In the last budget, people in Mount Atkinson, which is a estate which has been built with almost zero services, so it's just people, their houses and their cars, that if they've got them, is their only way to get in and out of the community. They now have a promise of a bus. It hasn't been delivered yet, but
What promise?
yeah,
Well, it's funded in the budget.
yeah, it's funded, but it's still coming. People in the southwest around Werribee have got new bus services, which are, as Peter was part of reorganising some of the buses in the Wyndham area on these sort of get them running faster in straight lines sort of principle, and they're the ones which are performing the best in the West, and that fledgling network was strengthened in the budget. So
Yeah, they've actually implemented a 20-minute weekend service on
Yeah.
some of the routes now.
Yeah, so there's some things, but if we waited for that incremental improvement, we'd all, people's kids who'd be doing that.
Very fit. Is
So-
that are there existing services there?
This one is our more recent proposal, which, again, it's conceptual. It'll take a bit of work, but we have actually tried to sort of put it onto the road network and to cost it. So this is 16 bus routes running north, east, west and north, south grids, connecting up to all the railway stations and to the ones which are promised, and running 10-minute frequency from 7 a.m. till 9 p.m. and then 15 minutes from 9 p.m. till midnight. And we've been so that's basically 100 services in each direction every day, and we've been able to cost that using industry figures of what it costs to have the buses and the drivers and the maintenance and the profit margins of the private bus companies and basically all of the costs. And just to run people through that, you could run that system for $150 million a year, we reckon.
This is Western Melbourne.
This is Western Melbourne, yeah. Currently, they spend $190 million or so on bus services in the West. So, but whenever we talk to politicians about this, they just say, every time we change a bus route, all that happens is that the people who feel like they don't like the change are on Channel 7, in the Herald Sun, and we hate changing bus routes. So we're saying, yes, you can do it. You've got to move to what some of the politicians are calling this West Bus, and we've taken that up from their suggestion. Here's something new. Here's something that's 21st century bus planning ideas, but let's overlay it on most of the existing system. So if we take the $190 million that's being spent at the moment, and we bring that up to parity with the rest of Melbourne because of long-term inequalities of funding and population growth, that would give you, we reckon, enough money to run basically 2/3 of the existing $120 million out of the 190 that we're using at the moment, and run a lot of the existing services and overlay this on the new system on the top of that. Some of it's duplicating, so we reckon that's a pretty fair way and enough for this to be. We found, the backbenchers we've talked to in the West, they go, yeah, okay, that makes sense. We can argue for that. How strongly they're arguing that's the question that we're still pondering.
There'd have to be a fair bit of political hunger for something that they can deliver for the West for transport, though, surely.
Well, that's what we would have hoped, and that's what we were building our campaign around. And the Werribee by-election really made that clear.
Yeah.
The vote in the West, basically 40% of the vote went to people who had articulated support for bus proposals. But 40% of the vote went to people who, on this issue, were to the left of the Labor Party. The Labor Party's vote fell a little bit, but all the preferences, or most of the preferences, went in an odd sort of way. Like Greens' preferences, some of them went to the Liberals. It was really odd, but basically there was enough to give Labor a scare, but not for them to lose Werribee. And then they were so terrified by the federal election that they were starting to think, we were starting to get, yes, we're really going to go for this. But the federal election, winning 3 seats in Victoria, when they thought they were going to go backwards, has left them going back to that complacent Labor Party.
And it's just on the complacency. They promise all these grand things to these newer states, and Peter and I are watching 18 months later, a simple bus route, even every half hour, still hasn't been implemented.
Yeah.
So they might say, oh, there's nice things in the meeting like this, or we're definitely for buses, we're getting the Mount Atkinson bus, we're getting the Tarneit North bus, and then 18 months later, they're still saying, it's coming soon, it's coming soon.
Yeah.
And you're like, it's a bus along a road, you're not building a new train line,
No.
a new train station.
Well, as Peter said very many times, it takes longer to change a bus route than it
Yes.
does to build
More one station.
Because you're employing people to actually work in the construction industry.
Yes,
That's
yeah.
what that's
Yes,
all
when-
about.
chopping down trees in Gandalfo Gardens, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Yeah, so really, we are in a position now where we've got a lot of people in the community understanding what we want. The difference between our first forays into the West in 2022 and the way candidates were talking about buses and the way communities were talking about buses in the Werribee by-election was a sign that people had really got on board with this. Two things, it gave them hope, because here it was something that we could say, this is practical and it's affordable, and then people were just saying, well, why aren't you doing it? Rather than getting bogged down in a lot of that sort of, oh, people hate buses and people will never use them if they emerge. So we've countered a lot of that, but we now are at the stage where it's just really that political grind of being there with the community. Like we were down in Werribee a few weeks ago on a Sunday morning for a bus fest with a local concert band and talking to people, and everybody pretty much that we talked to signed our postcard to send to the MPs, because people, so do you want a bus system that would help you?
Have you had any contact yet with Sam Groff, the new Shadow Minister?
No, but I'm hoping to be in touch with him this week. Yeah.
I like the idea of the postcards for the Faulkner Festa.
Yeah.
Have you got any of these postcards with you?
I haven't got them here, but I can get you somewhere.
For Faulkner? Yeah, so we can do
these are postcards for the West.
We can do a similar one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Send us a thing, we'll get some.
Yeah, for sure. Because I think really what this is about is really building on, the support you're getting for the 506 campaign sounds like it's really good. People are signing the petition, people are saying, yes, I would love to have a better bus, giving them the ambition of something that they can all get behind. So it's not just the people along the 506. It's people being able to have a sense that we're doing things collectively. Jan, remember the Upfield campaign in 1990, where really the thing that we had to do was to bring together all the people from all the stations all the way along the line, so they're all part of one campaign.
It was fantastic, wasn't it? It was fantastic, and it was not just it was the community, it was the station staff, the drivers, the guards, as they had then.
Yes, So the northern suburbs has a tradition of fighting for good transport, and people get that they need it, and people get that their reliance on cars is very often something which they would rather not do. You know, we always get stuck in this thing. People like to drive. Well, some people do, but most people don't like driving in congested Melbourne.
John, I was recently driving with Monica. We were going out of the city, and this was in the middle of the day, and we were stuck on the Craigieburn bypass. It was, and it's like there's so many people using it now. That isn't it cheaper for the government? Wouldn't it be cheaper to instead of building more roads or widening the
construction jobs?
Building buses.
But yes, that's absolutely right, and because every time you build a road, it fills up, and particularly you can see it the way COVID changed people's travel patterns. More people moving around the city during the day, and moving around in random ways like they do in the weekends, leading to a lot more congestion from the same number of cars. This is why now Saturday afternoon, Saturday morning is some of the most congested times, because people are trying to get to everywhere. It's not like you can have a clear way here and people are going in one direction at 8:30 and a different direction at 5:30. But they're going everywhere, and that just mathematically that means congestion spreads. So people know that they need an alternative, and I think our job is really to say, yes, you could have something that really would transform your life, your neighbours' lives, and also from you guys' reason to be here is climate, and this is a sort of a supply side model. It's how can you use the existing services, and it's a bit hard to be definitive about exactly how many people will swap from a car to public transport if you did this. So it's hard to actually get a number that says this is how much carbon you would save. But we finally got our act together to try and do those numbers, and the first cuts of them are, depending on what sort of mode shift you get, but even being reasonably conservative, it's actually something which would be, even just doing it in the West would be something that would be noticeable in the scale of Victoria's climate targets.
What fuel would you be using?
Well,
for the buses?
At the moment, most of the buses for the next 5 to 10 years will be diesel, but that's really not the climate issue. The climate issue is people not driving.
I know that's but it...
There are zero emissions from this year.
I know they're trying
new ones.
What, the diesel buses?
New buses must be zero emissions, but they've still got the old.
From the middle of this year, the new contract. They've
They're
already brought about 80 of.
No, well, they're not.
No, electric.
New buses.
New buses.
Yeah, sorry.
The new stock. So you've got the old fleet.
Yeah, electric buses.
Every single bus.
Sorry, I thought someone was trying to say that diesel buses.
There is renewable diesel.
It's quite
that's all there is.
the current rate, it needs to be accelerated, and that's where you do get jobs in Victoria, but it needs to be accelerated. But the big carbon saving is by having people in the bus.
Yes. John, to what degree, I'm sure there would be an influence by the cost of petrol. And I'm just wondering, I know that I felt that, I don't know, 10 years ago, petrol would be $3 or $4 or $5 a litre. Now it's still sort of between $1 and $1.50 and $2. Surely that, if it were to change.
Yeah, well, you see people's demand for some sort of action coming with increases in petrol prices, and it's the standing costs of the second, third, fourth car. I mean, the number of people in the outer suburbs who have 3 and 4 cars in their household, because every person over 18 has a life which needs a car. So the saving
is something worth campaigning on, or is
it's a cost of living thing.
Yeah, it's really an important part of the cost of living,
yes,
and it's an important part of
prices may go up.
what happens to in a local economy. Because if a household has $25,000, $30,000 a year that they're not spending on the standing costs of their third car, what else do they do with that? You know, they might.
And it ties in with housing choice as well, because if you've got a better transport system, you've got a greater proportion of rental or purchase dwellings are accessible to things. So.
Because we've moved all
the people furthest out that are paying the most.
Well, just have another question.
Yeah, for sure.
Just on the sustainability things, just trying to work out how it all fit. Like, I mean, I think in terms of sustainability, I like the hierarchy of, you know, walk, cycle, train, tram, and then bus probably. I'm not sure about the last two, but obviously they're all better than cars. I totally take your point there. But I just wonder how it fits in with all that. I mean, like here, I think we accept that the buses go east-west, and even though it's not perfect, we have reasonably good public transport going into the city and out again, so the buses going east-west is a bit of a priority, at least for people in Brunswick like me. And but I just wonder if you're thinking of the western suburbs like that, like the comparative costs in terms of extra train or even new tram or light rail services, is it like a pragmatic thing having the bus plan? Because it's easier to do than put in new rail and
because the
light rail and stuff.
The costs that we're talking here, you know, $280 million a year on operations compared to a current 190. That's sort of rounding errors when you start talking about rail expansion.
Rail and light rail.
And also the timeline, something that
can be done.
This, you know, notwithstanding everything saying about current bus routes, if they'd announced this in the May budget, they could have been running before the next election.
That's what happened in some of the Werribee routes.
And if they do, the electric buses would really change things a lot too. So that would be really great. But what about the priority of, because I cycle a lot too, the priority for cyclists? How is it going to affect our priority as cyclists, putting more buses on the road? I mean, hopefully we'll get some of the cars off, so that's good. But the you know, if you think of it in terms of the limited budget, I just mean in terms of the limited budget, but also safety. I guess I mean buses are a bit. You know, like
the idea
how
is
does
that
your plan fit in with putting in more safe cycling?
Well, the idea is that this puts the motorised traffic on the arterial roads, and you know, there's, when you look at the arterial roads in the outer suburbs, often they're built with really large green spaces on the side of them, wide footpaths. But instead of putting, how many times you see the bike path is not in that area, it's a place of paint.
It's really dangerous.
And you've got 70, 80 kilometre/h traffic, you know. Oh yeah, kids, you're riding to school tomorrow, just go down that 80 kilometre road. I mean, no. So, and I think part of to Jan's point too about how do people get to these fast, frequent, connected bus grids, I think part of what the government should be doing is to say to councils, well, your part of the deal is we'll give you some money, but you get us shaded good cycle routes to get out of the estates and get to the grid. Because you're not going to want to have your bike lanes on the big arterial roads. That's what's happening in Melbourne. We're finding all of the ways of having a bike network that keeps people away from the arterials. And so it's got to be part of a package.
Yeah,
The
I guess
other
that's what I'm looking for, the package.
The other thing, John, like with one of the concerns for me about having a bus network is that it's as having bikes being able to go on trains is, and it means it really gives you so much. It means you can go a lot further, and whereas buses, I mean, I know you can put buses on bikes.
Bikes on buses. The 510 had it for a while. You could put, but it was kind of really clunky to use.
Yeah, I mean, it does slow the bus down.
Yeah.
But when we're talking the distances that people are travelling in the West, you know, the average car trips are 10, 12, 15 kilometres, because just once you get out of Point Cook and you want to go to take your kids to a school, you know, the right
The newest mega shopping centre.
Yeah, so people are travelling long distances. Bikes are going to be part of the story of getting to the grid, and but yes, I think in the longer term, places like the Netherlands have solved that problem of the trip start and finish by if you've got your bus card, your public transport card in the Netherlands and you're a resident, you have access to the rental bikes at start and finish.
What about the free public transport where you don't have anything?
Yeah, well, yes, but the bike and train connection, or the public transport and bike connection, is hugely liberating, but it doesn't have to involve you having your bike in the train.
Actually, yeah.
And those.
So people like their bikes.
Yeah, oh sure, but if you're only going a little distance, it's
No,
okay.
you like your own bike as well.
Yeah, I know,
You like to
absolutely.
take your own bike.
Yes, I know. But if those bikes are there, that's a huge growth in the sort of European market, is when you can rely on there being a bike there. I mean, it's interesting. Public transport. What they called at the time, public transport a few years ago, telling me how amazing it is that Williams Landing, down on the Princess Highway, is one of the busiest stations in the metropolitan area for people riding their bikes there. Why is this so? What's happening? And it's because you can't get a bus from Point Cook. The bus. I've had my students watch what happens with people getting out of the bus. They get out of the station, they get on the bus does a loop through congested streets and takes it 6 or 7 minutes to get to the point where it's actually driving over the railway line.
Yes.
If they built Williams Landing Station under the overpass,
And had the interchange at the top.
and had the interchange at the top, then the buses would have had 6 or 7 minutes.
And it makes the buses more efficient and
Exactly.
more trips.
So people are riding their bikes to Williams Landing because the bus is no good, because the car parks are full. It's just obvious. People are taking the method, and they're riding in ways. They're riding through vacant land and creating their own bike routes. So that's real clear sense that people will do what makes sense, and so this is about making a bus system make sense for so many more people. But I think
I was going to say, well, we've been going for 45 minutes.
Yeah.
So,
Any last questions for
But-
oh, sorry,
yeah,
John, if you
but
want
just to sum up, I just think this is I think one of the things that I found in many years of being a climate campaigner, and is that what I'm drawn to, and I wonder whether it works for more people, is here is something really concrete that makes a difference for the climate and makes a difference for people's lives, even if they don't really have a strong, I mean, they'll be scared, but they don't know what to do with that fear. So how can Climate Action Moreland be part of that sort of campaign which has a climate game but a really specific ask? And it's also one that, one of the things which I find frustrating, but also it's just the reality, is that it takes a while. My colleagues at Friends of the Earth say nothing good ever comes unless you have a campaign that runs for 5 years. The builders, labourers, rocking the foundation. There's a guy in that movie saying, well, before we could do the green bans, we had to get rid of the corrupt leadership. And he's pushing rubble around with his crowbar, and he says, of course, that took us 10 years. But I think really what the message is, and the message that really makes it worthwhile to do it, is that that's really what it takes. And you need to be out there talking all the time and building people around a specific ask. One that, when you sit down with politicians and it ticks every box for them except their will to get off their asses and actually do it. So that's really where you can actually build a really strong campaign. So it'd be really great to talk more about how you guys might be the catalyst for something like this in the north.
John, will the West Bus map, the revised network, be made public or put on?
Yeah, slowly. We wanted to just leave it as much as possible in the Labor Party's hands so that they could say it's ours. But we're getting to the point where
because I understand a lot of the better politicians were spending their grand final weekend on honing their budget submissions, and hopefully quite a few of them were on buses. But the problem is at the moment that they're all going, yes, this is what my electorate needs, which is one piece of the grid, but they're not coming out together. And that's what the MPs of the North ought to be doing.
John, for Climate Action Merri-bek, we've been focusing on one route at a time. Is that the right approach, do you think, or should we be maybe at the same time as doing that, or maybe instead of doing that, should we be going for the bigger picture?
I think so. I think it's really important that people feel like it's something that would help them, but I don't think we've got the resources to have a 506 campaign for every route.
There's about 10 routes that run Sundays in this Merri-bek.
Or is that how we wear them down till they say, enough, let's just change it all?
If you were to pick a couple more, and these are really big ones, and they would be on any reformed grid network, the Bell Street corridor, you can do that for no cost because you've got so many overlapping routes. And then you've got the 508, which is still every 40 minutes on a Sunday and is crowded, and that goes from Northcote to Moonee Ponds, and that's through the middle of Brunswick. So those two would be the ones that, if you wanted to do something bigger, I'd be looking at.
Yeah, for sure.
One of the things that hopefully out of the 506 campaign comes the idea that communities themselves, with a bit of help from us, can actually do their own campaign. So that's happening with the 526. So we've got a...
Where's that from, Andrew?
That's in Newlands, Coburg Hill. One of those another shitty, a terrible bus service. So we've got a campaign group that's interested, and they can, do all the legwork. If that happens. Now, I've been trying to get people interested, locals interested in the 503, which is the Albion Street,
That's already on Facebook.
It's already, that's one of Peter's pages. And people are sort of saying, oh yeah, but so far they want somebody else to do it. So there are places where you can tap into a network. So the 526 is brilliant because there is a group, Kate Hall, who's a member of CAM, has got a group around her. So, and then Darabin, Climate Action Now. So it's like you can sort of say, well, we've done this, you can do it too.
Yeah, and I think if you also say to everybody, we're all together on North Bus, whatever that.
Yeah.
Something you just need. Peter can probably help you pull together of what we can all
Do a page,
Yeah.
what Facebook page, North Bus. We
Yeah.
could do that, and,
Yeah.
and link to the various.
But then
Various-
everybody gets
Yeah.
behind
Yeah.
that and they can see
Yeah.
that their bit is part of that.
Mm.
And I think that the thing that really gets you in the door, and I'll just finish with just this, is telling the stories of what it means to people to not have a good bus.
Mm.
And this is a young 17-year-old
Well,
woman.
living in Werribee, there's very limited buses near my area. I think there's one near Riverwalk. I live near Riverwalk, but not enough that the bus would drop me off there and then I could walk to my house because it's too far away. And because there's no buses, I have to go to my local library and wait there for a really long time until 6 o'clock. And so my parents can pick me up from the library. So I think there needs to be a bus way closer to my house so I can get home from school. I think it'd be a huge, significant change in my life because, going to the library has been a part of my life since year 7. So I've been going there every single day since year 7, and it's really draining. So I think it'd save me a lot of time and a lot of effort. The less is also the best.
So that's her story, and there's millions of stories like that. Just everybody goes, just imagine what would my teenage years been like if I'd had to be holed up in the library from 3 o'clock to 6 o'clock every day. What does that do to some kids' sense of their independence, their ability to understand where they live, to explore the world,
And then on weekends, the parents have to drive them to
Yeah.
every activity they do. They can't just walk down the street, catch the bus, catch the tram.
So, and those stories are what gets us in the door with the minister. One of the women from Mount Atkinson had to bring her son to the meeting with Gab Williams last year, and they bonded over being single parents, and so it's really, really powerful to be able to tell the stories of what it means for people. People can go, yeah, that's me. That could be me. That's my kids. That's and that's what really focuses attention on. Well, and here's a simple solution.
Yeah.
So you start from that. Public transport is for everyone. This is what it means if you don't have it. This is a solution. So it's a really neat way to message what you're doing.
Fantastic.
And
Thank you.
just another, some of this, the Sunday stuff is obviously quite a focus of the real campaigns in Merri-bek, and people might think each one might be one a year. In 2006 to 2010, cost Melbourne over 120 bus routes got Sunday service in that 4 years. We don't need to do an 800 campaign one year, 506 the next, 536 the next one. We should be getting all the Merri-bek routes funded at the next state direction and implemented in 2027. Not this, we can have these endless campaigns and endless Facebook groups. They actually could do it, and that was a lot more drivers hired, and they achieved it. And for some reason, we've got about probably a quarter of the routes haven't been done, and with this stumbling block, why don't they just finish it?
Well, I'm hoping after they see what we got out of the 506, they'll say they'll roll it out everywhere. And those 503 people will get without any effort.
And John, talking about Bronnie, talking about stories. Bronnie and I and a few people on this Sunday, we've got the Faulkner Festival, and one of the things we want to do is gather stories, people's comments about what impacts them, why they take the bus or the train for that matter, what impedes them, what facilitates it, how that then affects their life in other ways. At the Merri Food Hub too, we've started collecting stories, and just the other Friday somebody said, I'm dependent on getting from the train to the bus to get home because she can't drive, that's what she needs to do, but she's got to she said the bus doesn't link with the train. So I don't know how that works in with the, I guess if there are more buses, then there will be that enough of a link.
My Norwegian mentor says if it's more than 10 steps between the train and the bus, it's not a good connection.
Oh, really? Well, she has to run across
Street.
the Hume Highway, and you have
Yeah.
to do that in 2
Yeah,
button presses,
Yeah.
2 changes of light.
yeah. So public transport planners in Melbourne tell us all the time, oh, people won't make a connection, people won't make the transfer. And you say, well, they won't because you haven't given them one.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
It's not that people won't transfer, it's just that people rebel against bad transfers. And that
Well,
can be fixed.
the outer bits of Merri-bek, like Glen White, you probably have times where the train's 5 minutes late. They've done all this effort to make it a 6-minute connection. The driver goes, oh, I've just supposed to toddle off now. And as they walk up the exit of Glen White, they watch the bus to Hadfield take off.
Yeah.
The next one's half an hour. They'll do that once.
Yeah.
Second, third, fourth time,
Yeah.
they'll say, this is not going to work for me.
Exactly.
Drive to the station.
Yeah.
There is something also about the professionalism or lack of
Yeah.
That's right.
So
Even sometimes I've
some of
been,
the bus
because I'm a
drivers-
fitter person, I'll run to the bus.